Hey there, all you people. Hey there, all you people. Won't you come to see me? Hey, guys. Welcome to our lecture this week. We're talking about the 1920s now. Moving on from World War I to a totally different topic. So I'm going to give you a quick lecture on the 1920s today, and you're going to use these notes to do a little project for the rest of the week. So why don't we get started? So the Roaring Twenties bring change to the nation. It's hard to underscore the changes that come through the 1920s. America, during this decade, starts to resemble something more of what you might actually recognize. And we'll go into that as we go through this lecture. Let me see if I can, there we go, move. We're not going to watch the video, although it's a nice video. Some pictures that we analyzed in class, but tell you a little bit about what to expect from the 1920s. Cheers! Baseball, all that good stuff. Alright, so reasons for prosperity of the 1920s. So after World War I, the 1920s were a very large time of American prosperity. Although there was an initial slump at the beginning, the 20s soon became known as a time for the good old days. One of these things that happened was the rise of the automobile. Probably the single most important factor in creating prosperity was that the automobile came into widespread use. Ownership of cars jumped from 7 million to 23 million. Most people at least knew somebody that had a car or owned a car themselves in their household. The enormous growth of the automobile had more of an impact than, say, just transportation. The production in the industries that produce automobiles benefited greatly. So steel and glass and rubber and all the parts that go into making a car had a boom too. And by the end of the 1920s, 1 in every 9 workers in America was employed in an auto industry-related job. The automobile created new businesses, too, not just jump-started old ones. We're talking about gas stations and hotels and diners and all sorts of places. Cement to build roads. Roads were made out of cement, but they found out that cement roads were better for cars. So the cement industry also took off. Who would think that cement, building new roads and highways, had some consequences, and of course the rise of the automobile was also the Wild West. Like there were no driver's tests, and there were no regulations or age limits or anything to driving a car yet. And the rise of the automobile, as we said, had a big effect on transportation. Specifically, you could go farther in a shorter amount of time, and everybody had this easy mode of transportation at their fingertips. And because of this, it led to another phenomenon, the rise of the suburbs. You could now live farther away from the city and commute to work in the city, in the factory you worked in. And schools, too, were affected. Now, for the first time, kids from remote locations farther away from a school could afford to go to school because buses and things like that would transportate them from these locations. So, even food was affected. Typical American foods like hamburgers and french fries and shakes and apple pie were all served at Hallmark diners on the side of the road to feed weary, tired travelers. Now, Henry Ford introduced the Model T in 1905, and it was really the first car that anybody could afford to buy. He produced $1.6 million a year, and they only cost $300 a car. Now, that was affordable back then, but it's not as cheap as it sounds because of inflation. Now, Ford's assembly line production was so efficient that he could produce double. He could afford to double his workers' wages and still slash prices on his cars. Now, Ford wanted to actually give his workers enough buying power to own a Ford, right? Ford factory workers should own Fords. They should all drive Fords to work. It's a reasonable, logical conclusion. Now, advances in technology contributed greatly to prosperity. Cars were powered by petroleum fuels, and large oil industries boomed as well. Assembly lines and mass production techniques improved. Power plants, for the first time, provided electricity to homes and businesses at reasonable costs. This is a fun video of the assembly line, and if you watch it, it will show you the process of manufacturing a Ford. Unfortunately, it's probably too long for us to watch the whole thing, and yes, it's a silent film. Film is coming around in the 1920s too as a form of entertainment that is, or information, I suppose, in this one, that is previously unknown. I guess it existed, but it wasn't really available to the popular masses until the decade. Notice how they all each have a job on the line, and they all do one job at a time, monotonously. Now, businesses also employed advertising to persuade consumers to buy more. The U.S. economy changed from being a production-oriented to a consumer-focused economy. Banks eased loan requirements, making people less reluctant to go into debt. Living beyond one's means was looked upon as beneficial to the nation. As American society was experiencing a transformation in the 1920s, there were parts of American society that were rebelling against these developments. They were anti-change, and they tended to be older, less affluent, less urban, more rural people. They upheld traditional values and customs and resented modern threats to their way of life. For example, the challenge showed itself in the backlash towards immigrants. Now, as we talked about in previous American history, America was sort of the gold mine for immigration. As much as 20 million people immigrated here every year. However, in the 1920s, there's enough anti-immigration feeling to actually pressure Congress to enact stricter immigration laws, ending the great period of immigration we talked about before. Now, they viewed the large growing communities of foreigners as a threat. In the 1920s, too, you also see the peak of popularity in the Ku Klux Klan. And this isn't the Ku Klux Klan of Reconstruction. It's actually worse. They now hate, along with African Americans, they hate Jews, they hate Catholics. They basically hate anybody that's not an Anglo-Saxon, white, typical English American. Now, the threat to traditional values. They used the automobile challenged traditional values and tried the patience of travelers. Young people used cars to exercise freedom from parental rules, increased the numbers of commuters that also faced traffic congestion, and Americans began to experience traffic accidents and fatalities as a result of roadway accidents. And other new industries took off in the 1920s. The 1920s saw new discoveries and inventions in almost every field, laying the framework for many businesses. These inventions particularly included improvements in transmitting electrical power, motors, and transatlantic telephone services. New household appliances like vacuum cleaners, refrigerators, and toasters were introduced, and radio and motion pictures, aka the movies, also became more widespread. Now the American chemical industry expanded, natural gas and oil became more important, and more jobs were created as a result of that as well. Now, the economic growth of the 1920s was impressive. Home ownership skyrocketed throughout the population. Production advances in some industries such as railroads and coal production helped reduce the average work week. Now, the first airplane was actually flown by the Wright brothers in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina in 1903. In 1908, aviation pioneers also designed a plane that could take off and land on water. With these new developments, air travel also emerged as a crucial method of transportation of people in the later 1920s. Funny video of early air travel. Doesn't everybody look cramped, crowded, and also stressed out? So moving on. In the ensuing years, the airline business emerged as a major new industry. Airplanes were initially made of lightweight materials like wood and canvas. However, within the first decades of powered flight, planes were increasingly made of all metal parts and panels. Now, one of the major industries to emerge was actually the electrical industry. With all these new inventions powered by electricity, everybody wanted to have it in their home. And everybody actually paid the cost for these electrical appliances to be in their home. And advertisers campaigned that all these benefits would increase your standard of living. Now, the 1920s also saw remarkable improvements in manufacturing efficiency, Ford had introduced the electric conveyor belts. Each car moved along a belt, like just in the video where each worker did a different part. With this method, production was 6 times faster. As the use of conveyor belts and other new techniques spread, industry grew more productive. When manufacturers adopted the assembly line to the production process, they often achieved dramatic productivity gains. Now, the 1920s was also the age of mass consumption. The 1920s witnessed new patterns of consumption, creating new mass markets for goods. Consumerism came into existence in the boom times of the 1920s as a result of mass production. A variety of new products were on the market, and advances in advertising. Advertising stimulated demand, while workers with higher wages and more leisure time had greater purchasing power. And through the mediums like radio, print advertising, and consumers were more influenced than ever before. Now, not only are you influenced on your choices of what to buy, you actually have more options. In the 1920s, paying in installments became popular. Normally, only wealthy people could afford to pay cash outright for pianos and refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, and washing machines. And most people who wanted their own homes had to save every penny in cash before they could pay. And they had no money left over for luxuries like couches and refrigerators. So retailers developed new programs such as installment purchases and buying on credit. The buyers paid a small down payment and then paid the rest in small monthly increments. Consumers were able to buy more expensive goods like refrigerators, washing machines, furniture, radios, you name it. Now, also in the 1920s, a phenomenon known as the catalog occurred, catalog buying. And even until maybe 20 years ago, catalog buying was still very popular, even in America. Now, by then, the catalog was kind of like Amazon before Amazon. Particularly the Sears and Roebuck catalog was famous. Inside the catalog were advertisements and purchasing opportunities for thousands of products. Almost anything could be bought from the catalog, including household homes. Here are examples of catalog pages selling furniture items. Homes here are for sale. Anything but, I suppose, perishable food could be bought from the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Clothes, you name it. Now, agriculture unfortunately failed to share in the prosperity. During the war years, they were able to sell crops at higher prices and greater quantities. After the war years, that ended. Therefore, they did not have the same kind of successes that other industries experienced during this decade. All right. So, with that, our 1920s lecture comes to an end, and I will leave you with this Babe Ruth montage as I talk. You guys have a great week. Good luck on your project. Email me if you have any questions at kcerc@spartan.limacity.schools.org. Peace out, guys. Ooh, man, that guy can pitch. Oh, that's strike. Oh, hold on. He's going to swing. Give it a minute. Whop, gone. Oh, yeah. Everybody's rising to their feet. Woo!